Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About Christianity. I'm Zach, and that's Pablo down there in the bottom right-hand corner, and up in the top left corner is that old man Keith. And we've got a great guest with us this week, and we are so excited that he's decided to come on the podcast with us, Brother Dan Winkler. I'd say most of you are familiar with Brother Dan Winkler. You've probably heard him preach or teach or hold some meetings and things of that sort, and we are so excited. I made the comment before he got on here that we're definitely going to get schooled today about the topic that we're about to talk about, because he's got a plethora of information, and he's going to teach us today about what the generational gap is in the church. And we're so excited, and thank you, Brother Dan, for coming on today.
Well, thank you. And I'm grateful that you said in the top right-hand corner, the old man, and then said Keith and didn't use my name.
Like that?
Yeah.
So we're already on good terms.
There you go. We're on great terms, aren't we?
Oh,
Yeah.
I do say this, that, you use the word plethora. I have an idea that you don't use words you can't spell. So can you spell plethora?
Plethora. Plethora.
You've done well, buddy. Go ahead.
There we go.
Oh,
I like them big words too. Them
yes.
$10 words. You know what I mean?
And then he turns around and says, I like them.
I
Big
like them
words.
words.
Yeah. So
He's
Hey,
in
Kentucky.
Kentucky. What can you expect?
Oh, listen.
I didn't mean that. You know that.
Tennessee beat Kentucky in basketball last night,
Yes,
too.
they
So I don't
did.
know if we're necessarily on the best terms, Brother Dan.
That's correct. Y'all are having a pretty good year.
Yeah.
I,
We
I
sure
like
were.
I like Kentucky basketball.
Oh, it's life here.
That's
When
right.
it comes to sports, it is
It
life.
is.
So where do y'all want to go with this today?
Well, let's start out by talking a little bit about the podcast that you are involved with right now. I
Okay.
have, of course, I guess you started this, around the first of the year?
We did.
And I heard about it here 3 or 4 weeks ago. So I suspect that there are others who are just hearing about it. But
Okay.
tell us a little bit about that, Dan.
I'll give you a little history and then give you insights into the podcast. Back in 2017, I retired from local church work. But 5 years prior to that, I started doing research on a post-retirement ministry. And I wanted to reach out to the generation that are two below where I was living, the millennials in particular. And so I started visiting with and doing research on this generation and said to myself, first of all, I believe in the generation. I believe in your generation very, very much. You have so many unique and wonderful qualities. And so I said, this is the generation where I want to give my attention when I retire. So I started with a lot of millennials, young preachers, youth ministers, and even Christians that weren't in the ministry, and launched this ministry where we do a lot of writing and we write new books. I've been writing books for years, but these new books are designed with the millennial in mind. We look at subject matters, and even the writing style itself is designed with the millennial mindset. Your generation likes to read a certain type of book. And so we crafted our writings in that regard, worked in created videos for them and such like. In addition to all of that writing ministry, I went to a young man named Robert Hatfield, who's been in podcasting now for over a decade. And I asked him about the idea of doing a podcast because I knew millennials really listen to podcasting more than radios. And so we talked together, and I noticed an interest in Robert. So I just came right out and said, well, Robert, would you like to do one together? He said, yes. And that was back in August of last year. So we let several months develop there where it just simmered and we got ideas. In January, first Tuesday in January, we launched our new podcast entitled Today with Jesus. It is on the Light Network TV podcasting, and it's every Tuesday. It's launched. Of course, it's archived. You can go all the way back to this one. We're working through this year, we're working through the book of Mark. And Keith, what we're doing is we're going paragraph by paragraph, basically. And we ask two questions as we are reading through and studying these paragraphs. Question number 1, today, Jesus, from this reading, what can we learn about Jesus? And we step into his life, into his culture, and we learn, we try to interpret the passage itself. Then the second question is, today with Jesus from this reading, what can we learn from Jesus? And we bring Jesus into our lives and make the lesson extremely practical. Robert says we become insanely practical. So I tell him, you do the insane part, I'll do the practical part. And we've been doing that. It's been working great ever since. So we're about ready, I think, for chapter 4 now. And it's just been a delightful experience on my part. And it has received just an overwhelming response. And we're very, very grateful. And thank you for asking about it.
Well, like we were discussing before we began recording, we're on the same team here, and I love it when we are able to work together and help one another, help others. I guess.
Yes.
And let me just say on behalf of the millennial generation of which I'm a part of, that is awesome. That is awesome.
Well, thank you.
And it's so wonderful to see a preacher with your experience, with your, just the talent that you have and the knowledge that you have, that you want to kind of get closer to our generation and learn more about our generation, because, they often say, the future, we're the future of the church, but we're also the present of the church. And a lot of times people overlook that aspect of it. We can contribute to the church today. We can do things today. And a lot of people overlook that part of it. So just let me tell you how awesome that is, Dan.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Y'all have some very unique and rare qualities that, for example, millennials are very theocentric. You're very theocentric. We've been trying for years to get people to love God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength.
Right.
That's who you are.
Yeah.
You are very geared to helping people. In fact, you almost view spirituality with philanthropy as an equal. That's not altogether true, as you know.
Right.
But here's a generation that wants to help people. Again, for years, we've been preaching Jesus' words, I was hungry and you fed me, thirsty, you gave me to drink. That's your generation. You have some tremendous qualities. And what we have to do is help strengthen those qualities and mesh those qualities with other facets of Christianity. And I know when I first started doing this, I was visiting with a whole table full of millennial youth ministers and preachers. And I said, y'all are millennials. And I said, y'all are weird. And they all began to laugh. Now, that was their response. Yeah. And then I said, but now hold on a minute. I'm a baby boomer. And we invented weird.
I was going to say, you all invented weird.
We invented weird. All you have to do is go to Woodstock to find that one out. So someone invested in us.
Yeah.
And those who invested in us are dear to us. And so you have to put a finger on the pulse of where you are in life. And I realized, okay, I'm reaching a time when maybe it might be something I need to do. Maybe I need to start thinking about others coming along and share what others have shared with me. So that's kind of where we are. And it has been to my benefit. I've been blessed more than I've been a blessing, I know.
Awesome.
Well, let me say this to kind of segue us into the topic. I think we all knew that this is what the direction that you are pursuing right now, which is one reason we wanted to invite you onto the program to discuss this topic.
Okay.
I remember when you first said, this is what I'm getting ready to do and the direction that I'm going. And there were people who kind of went, he's doing what? Just in all seriousness,
Yeah.
But here's my concern is that, you just went ahead and said the millennials are weird. I
Let's repeat
I haven't heard anybody else express it in quite those terms, but what I hear,
Okay.
what I hear though is people looking at the millennials and saying, I just don't get those millennials. I don't understand them. They might say weird, but they look at them as a lost cause. And I love that you are looking at that generation and saying they're not a lost cause. They're simply different than we are. And understanding that there needs to be a bridge there between the generations. But I see so many who get frustrated because they don't understand and they don't seek to understand. And because of that frustration, the gap gets larger. Zach, is that your dog or is that?
That's not my dog. I ain't got no dogs.
Dan, you got a dog?
Not mine. Not my dog.
That's Pablo's dog right there.
That's my millennial dog.
I thought it was Zachary personally. I thought it was Zachary.
No, that's my millennial dog.
Yeah.
All right. So, you know, we have we see changes, and I'm glad that you mentioned the difference in the writing styles. It's not just a difference in the writing; it is a difference in communication.
Yes.
And each generation has the method that they prefer, and that makes it very challenging for preachers to try to communicate with all of those different generations.
Very true.
Very difficult.
And that was kind of the idea behind this episode.
Okay.
You know, how well, I don't know. You were talking about some ideas that you had that you wanted to talk about before we began recording. Why don't we talk about some of those for a moment, and then maybe we can address some remedy.
Okay.
Well, if you don't mind, Dan, start with the breakdown of the stages of life and sure, briefly give those one words. That way we can kind of get a foundation for our conversation.
Well, I'd like to start with Bible.
Oh,
and we go back to Psalms. That's always a good place to start.
Yeah, that's always a good place to start.
And stay, basically. You go back to the book of Psalms, and it talks frequently about the coming generation.
Right. Which
suggests to us there are different generations. And when you talk about a generation gap, it does exist because generations exist. And so in my mind, and this is only in my mind, I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist, but just from observing life, like Pablo, correct. Pablo could step right in here and help us out for sure. But just from an experiencing of life, I kind of break down life into about 6 different generations. And I like to use one word to capsule each generation about 15 years in span. And so you have from birth to age 15. And I use the word entity there. This is where you just learn that you exist as an individual. And ages 0 to 15. The second generation is ages 15 to 30. And I like to use the word identity there. This is where you're beginning to learn from 15 to 30 who you are as a person. What are your strengths, your weaknesses, your skill sets, your likes, your dislikes? All of that develops in a very acute fashion between the ages of 15 and 30. The next 15 years, from 30 to 45, I like to capsule with the word under the word industry. And this is where we begin to step into life itself. We've gotten our education behind us, basically. We step into life itself and we begin to really contribute to society. we become very industrious for the next 15 years, ages 30 to 45. The next 15-year period, ages 45 to 60, I like to capsule under the word reliability. We have now spent 15 years being industrious, fine-tuning our skill set. And now at the age of 45, we're known by others for who we are and what we do well. And we become the reliable ones that people turn to get things done. And that's where we step into leadership roles more between the ages of 45 to 60. The next 15 years, ages 60 to 75, I like to put that under the word dignity, because now at 60, you're beginning to get close to retirement years, and most of life has been experienced. It's behind you. You've learned a lot. Hopefully you have some wisdom. So between 60 and 75, these are the years of dignity, where you begin to shift gears in your emphases. People come to you and ask you questions. You begin to step into the arena of a sage. You begin to mentor, such like, and so forth. And then you have after 75, from 75 to 90, 15 years, if you're blessed to live that long. And I like to capsule that under the word serenity, because these are the years where you're experiencing life and everything is serene, and you're enjoying the relationships that you have built through the years. You're living off of the benefits of the investments in people and monies that you've made. You're thinking more about heaven, reading more about heaven, strengthening your relationship with God. So these are days that are very serene. 6 different 15-year segments of time. Now, each one of those, excuse me, Zachary, each one of those has a subculture attached to it. And the subculture, this again, my experience, comes from that segment of 15 years where you are beginning to identify who you are. From the ages of 15 to 30. Okay, there are some football teams or basketball teams that are the powerhouses in that segment of your life. For me, you go back, it was the University of Texas. They were always number one, or the University of Arkansas. Sometimes right. Oklahoma would come in. Every now and then Alabama would slip in. Well, now those that are between 15 and 30 now, it's all Alabama as far as football is concerned. So in this segment of time, 15 to 30, you have sports teams that are powerhouses. You have music that you begin to cater to, musicians that are and so forth. And so this is a time when you begin to develop who you are and your taste, and you have a subculture that walks with you the rest of your life. Let me illustrate. When I was between 15 and 30, my subculture were the hippies and, the British invasion, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones and such like. And so my subculture became one of, in fact, our word was anti-establishment. Well, as my generation grew into other times of life, for example, the days of industry and reliability, when we began to make things happen, we became the leaders. That's when, for example, in the Lord's church, you began to hear, now, if it's tradition, it's to be suspicioned. Do you know who was saying that? Baby boomers.
I was going to say
the baby boomers were saying that, and they were the ones who, when they were in their years of identity, were being formed by anti-establishment. Anti-establishment, and if it's tradition, it needs to be changed, is saying the same thing in different terminology. And so what was happening was a subculture that developed between the ages of 15 and 30 went with a generation of people and began to impact others by the emphases that were being stressed. So that's what happens.
Right.
We have these subcultures that formulate, And when we come to generation gaps, it's my subculture in conflict with your subculture. My group of music, I like the Beatles and the Moody Blues and so forth and so on. There's a generation that's come along and they like rap music and they've got R&B and stuff like that. I can't get into that. I don't understand it.
I don't understand it.
Well, yeah, but there's some that really they have it, man. It's them. It's their
Right.
subculture. I don't get them. They don't get me when it comes to music. The same thing is true when it comes to Christianity and spirituality. Our subcultures are in conflict, and what we need to do is find ways to learn from and benefit from each other's subculture.
Yeah,
Now,
and I think
there for a
too
while.
with the misunderstanding, I think you said it right there. I think the misunderstanding between the generational gaps in the church pretty much boils down to what you said. I don't get you and you don't get me. And they don't make an effort to get closer to one another. And I think sometimes the older generation looks down on the younger generation as, you know, we're trying to express ourselves. We're trying to find our own way. We don't want to do what we've done in the past. We want to go a new path. And the younger generation looks at the older generation as being very traditional, very set in their ways, unwilling to change, not able to adapt to the new culture that is coming up in the generations that are going to follow us, not just the millennials, but the generations that will
Correct.
follow. And I think we look at those and we say, you know, I really don't want to make an effort to try to get closer to the older generation. And the older generation looks at the younger generation and say, listen, I don't get you. You're weird. And I don't really want anything to do with you. And so you get set where you're at. And I think that's where the difference comes. And that's where I guess the misunderstanding is in the church when it comes to the generational gap. And I'm kind of reminded of Romans chapter 12 and verse 10. That's one of the verses that I wrote down. It was, be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love and honor, giving preference to one another, not lacking in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patience in tribulation, and continuing steadfastly in prayer. And that's how you behave like a Christian. And behaving like a Christian also includes how you treat other Christians. And we've got to be better at treating other Christians better in the church today. We got to make an effort to understand
you said
one
something
another.
a minute ago when your generation looks down on the younger generation and the younger generation. I would suggest that what we have is both generations are looking down on
Yes.
each other, not viewing the merit of one another.
Exactly right.
Let's go to the Bible a minute and think about individuals who interacted, though they came from differing subcultures, differing generations. Think about the Apostle Paul and I went back, I just looked at some of Paul's writings, and in 1 Timothy 1, verse 2, to Timothy, my true child in the faith, grace, mercy, and peace from God the Father and Christ Jesus our Lord. Look at the affinity that is involved in those words. Titus chapter 1, verse 4, to Titus, my true child in common faith, grace and peace from God the Father. Philemon chapter 1, verse 10, I appeal to you for my child, Onesimus, whose father I became in my imprisonment. And then these words to the Philippians about Timothy, one of his proteges. I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon. Listen to Paul's words about Timothy, so that I too may be cheered by news of you. For I have no one like him. I have no one like Timothy, he says, who will be genuinely concerned for your welfare. For they all seek their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. But you know Timothy's proven worth, how as a son with a father, he has served with me in the gospel. I hope, therefore, to send him just as soon as I see how it will go with me. And I trust in the Lord that shortly I myself will come also. Here you have an older Christian seeing the worth of younger Christians and investing himself in them and lifting them up And you see younger Christians, such as Timothy, seeing the value of an older Christian, even to the point that he served him as a spiritual father. That's what we need to be seeing, in keeping with what you said in Romans 12. We have to think about each other and the worth of one another.
Right.
How do you suggest we mesh conflicting cultures?
You know, I think one of the biggest things is we've got to realize that both cultures bring invaluable things to the church. And I think sometimes we overlook that. You know, when you think about young Christians, you think specifically about growth. And that's the only thing that you think about. You think about, oh, well, they're growing, they're still learning, they're still doing all these things, they're finding their way. But at the end of the day, they also can contribute today. They can be very valuable today. But I also think, as speaking for the younger generation, and when we talk about the older generation, I think we've got to understand that the things that they bring to the church, priceless experience. They've been there. They've done that. They've been through the split. They know how it goes. They bring knowledge. They can teach you and mentor you in the way that you need to go, because they've been through everything you're going to go through in your lifetime. They've already been through it. So why don't we value their expertise and their experience and lean upon it as we're trying to make our own way in the church? And I think we've got to start valuing each other more. And there are a lot of other practical things that you could do, but I think it all starts with treating one another better and valuing what each generation brings to the church and the experience. And when you can work together, there's nothing that you can't accomplish.
So do you remember the words of Paul in 1 Corinthians 12? Which is more important, the eye or the ear?
Right.
Which is more important, the head or the foot? Is either one more important?
They're both of equal importance.
Of equal importance. So which is more important, the older Christian or the younger Christian?
Both of equal importance.
They're both of equal importance. And Zachary, I think right there is the key to bringing our subcultures together. We must see that wherever we are in life and whatever subculture we have taken with us through life, we are all on an equal plane in the eyes of our Heavenly Father, and we need to see each other on that same plane of interest and value. And so here you are, I'm going to guess you're in your early 30s, am I correct?
22.
22? Okay, early 20s. Why? But have you started shaving yet?
I have, but I can't grow a beard. So
Well, you'll reach a point where you won't.
Uh-oh, Keith.
And this is a generation thing.
Yep.
My mother hates this.
Yeah, I can't grow a beard.
Anyway,
We've got less than a minute, don't we, Keith?
Well, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we're running out of time here.
I'm sorry.
It's
okay.
It went by
It's
very,
been
very
awesome.
fast. And I've got a feeling we're not done with this topic. I don't know if Dan will be able to join us to do more with it or not, but
School us again.
yeah. So
I would like to close my part by saying, regardless of your age or my age or whose age we're talking about, we all are of equal value to God, and we all learn from each other. It's not you've been in life and experienced so much. Well, those of us that have experienced life can learn from those that are learning about life. We
Right.
all learn equally from each other. And when we get to that point, the generation gap meshes and subcultures can learn from it, can benefit from one another.
There we go. It's wonderful.
Well, we want to say thank you for listening to this episode. And this is season 3, episode 36. And we've got to wrap it up because it's going to shut us off here any second now. So
Okay.
thank
y'all
you
for letting
very
me be
much
part
for
of it.
listening.
Thank you.
Oh.